Hi, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for joining us. Today I'm going to present the main outcomes of our class, our semester, analyzing resiliency at Logan Airport. As regards the content of my presentation, first I'm going to give a short introduction about Logan and its impact in the New England region. Then we're going to talk about the hazards and threats we have identified, and then we're going to talk about more about resiliency, the vulnerabilities that we have identified, cascading effects, recommendations, and to finally end with some external dependencies and government agencies that should be involved in resiliency. Well, as regards Logan Airport, it has a critical role meeting the transportation's need for Boston, the New England region, and also the country, and it's one of the most important international and local gateways from the country. The economy at New England heavily relies on air transportation. The industry that we have in the areas, such as high-tech, biotechnology, education, tourism, they really rely on air transportation, not only for movement of people, but also for shipping. And Logan really creates many opportunities in the area, not only direct jobs, but also there are multiplier effects and indirect effects, created a total output in the area of more than 7 billion per year. So we can imagine that any disruption or delay in the service of Logan Airport really has a dramatic effect for the area. Having said that, it's important, first of all, to identify which hazards and threats could affect Logan operations. During the semester, we have studied different hazards. They will be classified as natural and man-made, which is intentional or accidental. From this semester, from the speakers that we had and our field visit, we learned that Logan is currently putting the main focus on flooding and hurricanes, especially because of the coastal location of the airport. But we want to emphasize that other threats, such as cyber attacks or terrorist attacks or accidents, need also to be addressed when we talk about resiliency. Well, in this matrix, we're showing, as Professor Flynn said, the 5 lifeline sectors that we analyzed and the 5 resiliency elements that we have studied for each lifeline sector. To mention a few, we worked on proactive design measures to make the airport prepare for threats and hazards, and for tools and applications to quickly restore the services and the operations in the aftermath of a threat. So these 5 lifeline sectors, yes, it's a kind of confusing picture, but the idea is that these 5 life sectors are very interconnected and they depend on each other, and one change in one sector or disruption could affect another one. We deeply studied these interdependencies at Logan, and we tried to identify the main cascading effects that will occur after the disruption of one of the sectors. So although we acknowledge that all the sectors are interconnected, interrelated, we found that electricity, it's very important, and any disruption in electricity could lead to dramatic consequences. All the lifeline sectors rely on electricity, for instance, to power pumps for water and fuel, for communication services, and for the normal operation of Logan Airport as a transportation infrastructure. But what will happen if we have any electricity disruption? Well, then the fuel sector is going to step forward, and it's going to be the sector that will feed backup generators so that we can restore the electricity service and continue with the operations. Here we have also to make a notice that the fuel sector relies heavily on transportation. That will be the sector that we supply or make it possible to have the fuel supply at the airport. So, well, then during our research, our field trip, our conversations with Logan, we have identified main vulnerabilities at the airport. In general, they are associated with flooding and vulnerabilities on electrical infrastructure such as substation, communication systems, and the transportation infrastructure. We have also identified vulnerabilities in the fuel system, very short fuel storage, and that the infrastructure is exposed to accidents and man-made hazards, and cyber security issues. So taking these vulnerabilities into account with the possible cascading effects that we have a right to a set of recommendations that Logan should implement in order to address resiliency. Well, first of all, during our field trip, we have visited Wood Island substation, and we also learned that other substations are vulnerable to flooding. They don't operate equally, and any disruption of their service will have consequences in the electric service of Logan. So they are very vulnerable to flooding under category 2 hurricane, so we need to weatherproof those substations and also to provide flood barriers in order to prevent water to get there. As I mentioned before, we need backup generation at Logan in order to quickly restore the service under a disruption. The electricity group have come up with an idea that they are going to develop more deeply, but just a brief. They have suggested to have microgrids, like small grids that could operate independently or together with the main electric grid that could be fed by batteries, generators, and also by CHP systems. Then, well, as I said before, Logan counts with only 1 day jet fuel storage on site. So the fuel sector had the idea to increase the storage by providing an extra on-site fuel tank. They have suggested possible locations at Logan, as you can see in the upper right corner in the slide. And also they have come up with the idea of having some storage on other airports that belong to Massport, such as Worcester, so you can reroute the planes or just move the fuel to Logan in case it's necessary. Then we have identified, as you can see here, that the tanks are very exposed to man-made hazards, could be intentional or not. So another suggestion is to provide a barrier to protect that infrastructure. Then in the same way as the substations, we have that some buildings such as the police department and TSA building are really exposed to flooding, and they contain critical communication equipment that should be relocated and protected. So that's some measures suggested. And then cybersecurity, well, we found that nowadays it's a critical issue to be addressed, moreover in this information era. So we found that these SCADA systems are working with Microsoft XP, which is very vulnerable to being hacked. So our suggestion is to update the operating systems on the SCADA system. And also we made a list of recommendations that could be implemented by Logan or by third parties that are specialized in these kind of issues. Then as regards transportation infrastructure, well, we are suggested to put some flood barriers to protect the buildings, but we want to move key personnel from one building to the other. So the transportation group had this bright idea of having an agreement with the Boston doctors to make it possible to move people from one building to the other or help during evacuation, etc., as well as other measures to protect infrastructure and make it possible to move people. But well, we have implemented these recommendations at Logan. The question is if we are still protected. And well, we have studied these questions. We tried to think over Logan boundaries. And the answer is that Logan relies heavily on other stakeholders, agencies, private companies that provide services or infrastructure. So in order to be really resilient, we need to get them involved in this process. So in this slide, we have identified several agencies that are related to Logan, and well, we classify them within the 5 lifeline sectors. For example, as regards electricity, despite the fact that Logan is investing in clean energies and producing a little bit of energy, it will never be off the grid. So it's important to get a conversation and awareness of NSTAR national grid. So now we're going to go over some of these agencies and some suggestions that we have and incentives so that they also are involved in resiliency. Well, as regards the fuel system, so we learned that Sunoco Logistics provides the fuel through barges, and then Fuel operates the system. So one idea that the transportation group and also the fuel group in their negotiations that they had is to provide this system that is currently being implemented in Florida, to having a mobile fuel transfer and temporary fuel transfer system so that we can get the fuel there in spite of any high-level rides, etc. Then another alternative is to incentivize airlines companies so that if they invest in resiliency measures or fuel efficiency, they can have discounts in their fees or etc. So they are encouraged to get involved in resiliency and contribute. Another issue is the water system. We learned that Logan Airport experienced in 2010 a boil alert, so you might be familiar with this process, but it's very important to give good quality of water and a reliable sewage system at the airport. So it's important to have any partnerships or work together with the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority and the Boston Water and Sewage Commission. Something interesting that we learned is that at Deer Island Water Plant, they have a lot of experiences in exercises for testing contingency, and it's something that Massport could learn from them and start implementing. Then we have the transportation system. So Logan really relies on the transportation infrastructure of the Massachusetts DOT and the MBTA. And well, the transportation sector is going to talk in deep about this, but the main idea is that we need people to get to Logan and from the airport to their homes, not only the passengers, but also all the employees that Logan is having currently. And these main transportation agencies are exposed to flooding and also to attacks or accidents. So it's important to have a dialogue with these agencies and to have agreements and incentives so that they also invest in resiliency. There are some bilateral agreements, but I will leave the topic to the transportation group so that they can go over them in detail. Finally, we have identified some federal and state and local agencies that should be also involved in resiliency conversations. We believe that in order to successfully implement some of the measures that we have suggested, these agencies should be involved. For example, if we want to insulate a flood plug in a tunnel, it's not something that Massport will decide or not. They should coordinate with the Massachusetts DOT, other agencies. So it's important not only to have them involved, but also to do exercises so that each party has their clear roles in these measures to recover from threats, and so we can successfully implement these measures. And then we have identified some grants and incentives that are currently available for financing some of these recommendations. We classify these grants within each of these sectors: electricity, water, and communication. And it's a resource of fund that probably Massport will take advantage of. So well, finally, this is our final matrix with the aspect that we have covered in this presentation. Thank you so much.